I think you might still be muted though.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay.
So we see it in presenter view right now, or in work view right now. Perfect.
Okay. Hi, my name is Brosnan-Spencer.
I'm Bobby Fossek.
And Meadow. And we are Naknuwithlama Tiichamna, caretakers of the land.
We are a grassroots, family-led effort in the process of becoming a nonprofit organization. We are serving to steward and strengthen the symbiotic lifeways, habitats, and food systems of the Blue Mountains through seasonal round immersion camps and ecosystem restoration. And here's a picture of camas field at Ladd Marsh, where we gather camas and gather camas seed as well for a restoration project.
And so we just wanted to kind of talk about some of our bigger projects we're working on. Again, we're just a family-led grassroots effort, but we're just an extension of our ancient way of life, and a big part of what's on our heart has always been to spread ourselves out throughout our homelands even more, and to just work together to perpetuate these efforts and restore our presence and the presence of our plants back in some places like the Grand Ronde Valley particularly. It's a very important place to us. And so one of our major projects is native prairie and riparian restoration in Cove, Oregon. And here you can see this is a photo I took of my horses grazing in a portable electric fence I move around, looking over the Grand Ronde Valley, looking northwest towards Mount Emily. This is on the site here. And so, through a series of synchronistic events, we found ourselves working in partnership with the Ascension School Camp and Conference Center in the Episcopal Diocese of Eastern Oregon. It's a church to restore 80 acres of their land holdings here in Cove, which have been heavily farmed for the last century. And for those that don't know, Cove is a big crossover area between all neighboring tribes. Utilize this area for lots of different gathering purposes. And this is a part of, they set the intention as an organization to repudiate the doctrine of discovery and the negative effects it's had on indigenous people of color, and ecosystems across the globe through their sort of supremacy tactics and erasure tactics. And they're also offering staff and resources in the meantime to help us raise funds and incubate our own nonprofit. And this is a picture of fall of 2019. We had a small group come out, and Colleen was there, and we planted some camas in this little area here. This is just a small portion of the project, but it was kind of an initiation planting to just let people know and start bringing people together. And this is another one of our hopes, is to kind of have opportunities to bridge gaps and give people the opportunity to help bring back some of these foods where they've been completely removed. So we're working on restoring the riparian habitat along the traditionally fish-rearing tributaries of Catherine Creek that flow through the property. In our native place names atlas, it refers to Cove as Wiwala-Titpa, many springs and streams place, and they were all anadromous fish and resident fish rearing habitat before they were all channelized and ditched. And so we're also working to restore a portion of the traditional prairie diversity and first foods abundance of the Grand Ronde Valley here on this site. And it also includes a nature trail and outdoor classroom for outdoor school type programming and educational experiences for people to learn, and to also just have a place for the community to come walk and stretch their legs. And so in the picture here, we got some of our bunch grasses coming up and some wapato and the camas bulbs that we planted during that event. So native plants, some of the plants that we're focused on restoring to the site. This picture is at PlantWorks Native Plant Nursery in Cove. We decided to work with them because they're like a mile away from the site that we're restoring. So it just is really efficient to be able to store our plants there that they grew and to just go grab what we need when we need it. And they're been really great and supportive, so it makes it really efficient to work with them. So some of the plants we're focused on restoring, to name a few, are native willows, coyote willow, Mackenzie, peach leaf, water birch, thin leaf alder, black cottonwood, golden currants particularly, which currants are one that, you know, I've heard used to be just everywhere. And then in the early 1900s, the Forest Service had a ribes genus eradication effort, and they intentionally wiped out the majority of the currant population and the gooseberry population in an effort to theoretically protect the timber industry from disease. Serviceberry is an important one that we're restoring a lot of. Chokecherry, elderberry, woods rose, Nootka rose, black hawthorn, mock orange, and some of the more prairie dynamic type plants we're restoring are native bunch grasses, such as Idaho fescue, blue bunch wheatgrass, tufted hairgrass, big bluegrass, Great Basin wild rye. And what's neat is I took the pollinator mini conference with Sarah Gardner, who's doing those studies that Cheryl was talking about. And these native bunch grasses are a crucial habitat for those ground mining bees. And so we got to get these bunch grasses restored. If we don't get these bunch grasses restored, we'll be shooting ourselves in the foot. And also those sagebrushes. And another big one, camas. This Grand Ronde Valley was known for its, you know, like an ocean of camas here. People came from all over to gather and bake camas. Tule reeds, various lomatiums, arrowleaf and hoary balsam root, native onions, and many other wildflowers, all of which are important for shading, filtering, retaining water, preventing erosion, sequestering carbon, providing habitat and feed for wildlife, pollinators, and all of which are traditional foods, medicines, and materials. Tongue twister. So here's some photos I just wanted to share. This is us last year out planting a bunch of willows, top left, and moving to the right. Here's fall of 2019 when we were doing our initial planting of native bunch grasses. The fields were planted with wheat for nearly 100 years, and every once in a while they do alfalfa. And so we used a no-till drill to get the grass seed planted. And so we hire out, you know, local help and their equipment. And here's a nice sunset picture after we got done installing a bunch of trees and shrubs and exclosures on the site here, looking over towards what do they call this? Feist Point, the Tule Lake. This used to be called here. Now it's all drained. Hot Lake and Lad Marsh over this way. And here's one of our helpers removing a culvert, one of our many efforts to start to bring back the function of these streams flowing that are braiding through this property. Here's another picture. The horses get put to work too. They're clearing out some non-native grasses here to make way for getting some of the native diversity put back in there. And here's a picture of some golden currants that we planted and that took off successfully. And one thing that you know, is more idea form and small scale experiment, but I think, you know, is a good conversation to bring to the table, is assisted migration of certain native plants, not of every plant in the world, but and so like is commonly said, as habitat niches shift northerly and up in elevation, the availability of some of our foods may become scarce due to climate change. And as some of those niches move north, assisted migration of certain native plants, fire adapted plants, may be an adaptive way to create more diversity in food sources while sinking carbon and shading streams and preventing erosion. And so some of the plants that we're doing small scale experiments with are the native oaks, very fire adapted species of plants that produce super nutritious source of carbohydrates and fats, a staple food for many people. The native hazelnuts, the western Corylus cornuta beaked hazelnut right here, sugar pines and other fire adapted native pines that also produce these delicious pine nuts that are a great source of fatty acids and protein. And wapato. Wapato particularly is one that we got established here, and it has been found naturally occurring locally, but with the extreme manipulation of the wetlands and the stream channels where she lives, much of the population has been lost. And a lot of people, if they see it growing, anything like this that's not their crop, they're going to burn it, spray it, drain that wetland. So it's like, who knows how much diversity was once here. But
one of our next projects that we're focusing on is the land-based seasonal round immersion camps. Our intention is to create more opportunities for our Native community to slow down and deepen the connection to our homelands and revitalize traditional ecological knowledge throughout each season. Here's a picture of one of our camps on Mount Emily. And here's some of our spring foods. So during these camps, we focus on how to harvest, process, cook, and preserve these foods for the year so that we can eat them throughout the year. And we also do a lot of giveaways and help out with different ceremonies. The top left, we have Latit, and then Piache, Luksh, Chaush, Sikni, and Mamin. Spring abundance. We are working on preserving the knowledge of our many spring foods and their various uses, such as teas, salads, syrups, stews, supalil, and medicines. Here on the top left, we have Meadow with a glacier lily. Bottom corner, we have Puthla. And then in the center, we have stonecrop. Bottom right, tube grass. And top right, cat's ears. So we're always trying to learn our foods and the different varieties and diversity, and different ways how to cook them and get them on our plate and in our bellies. Then we go into our summer foods and our summer camps. Here we have Chumash, Sawitk, Anipash, and Nunas. I recently just learned how to bake chumash and just within the last few years, and it's my favorite one now. I love all of them, but now it's just my favorite one. Camp life. So some of the duties around camp are watering and moving the horses and the electric fence daily. We don't always have our horses with us for camp, but any opportunities that we can bring them, we take those opportunities. Some other duties are cooking, gathering and filtering water, keeping camp clean, and clearing the deadfall, fuel buildup, and ladder fuels for firewood, gathering the available native plant seed on site to plant in disturbed areas around camp as well. We also take ample time for inner reflection, nature connection, and day hikes. Then we have our Lad Marsh Hot Lake Camp. This is an annual camp focused on gathering tule for mat weaving opportunities, We also gather our camas seed there for a restoration project, and the currant berries are very abundant there. Top left corner, we have some camas seed that we gathered there, and then the currants. Meadow weaving cattails, bottom left corner, and Meadow and her dad harvesting tule for tule mats. We like to get our tule mats every year and dry our foods on them. So mainly just like our roots and berries, we dry on our tule mats. I also, hold space for people if they want to learn how to gather and weave tule mats. This camp is also an opportunity to connect with the highly significant cultural site and soak in the healing mineral waters that are there. Lad Marsh has an abundance of weaving materials and foods like tule, sedge, cattail, Great Basin wild rye, the switched camas, and willow. We look forward to going there every year, and we always receive a warm welcome when gathering. And it brings us into our berry camps. Again, with the berries, we also focus on how to harvest, process, cook, and preserve the berries for the year. Here we have matup, that's the elderberry, chicha, the serviceberry, tamish, the chokecherry, and chun, the currants, and wunu, the huckleberry. And I also, when I have the opportunity and it feels safe to do so, I offer classes on how to make different medicines and syrups, medicinal syrups, things like that. Processing foods. So some of the ways we like to process our foods is to dehydrate them, can them, and freeze them. So at the bottom left, we have some choke cherries that were crushed and dried, sun-dried, and we add that into our soups, and we add that into our breakfasts like oatmeal or root porridge. And in the center, we have some berries drying on the screen. The top right corner, we have suplil, where there's acorn flour in there, sawit, kaush, currants, chicha, and wunu. And then the bottom right is the berries being dried and put away for the year in different jars. And then when we're ready, we just hydrate them and eat them. Here's some food. The top left is berry roots, nuts, porridge. This is one of our staple foods. And as you can see, there's like a scoopful of bear fat right there. Where we live here, there's a lot of hunters that hunt bear. And so sometimes we'll ask for the fat so we can render it and add it to our meals. And then, so that's the top left, and then the top right is that being prepared. And bottom left is acorn bread, and in the center is my stew I like to make. Again, one of our staple foods. It has elk and roots and berries and corn and dried herbs. The bottom left is some wapato that we gathered on the Yakima River. So with that, we dried it, we canned it in deer broth, and we ate it fresh. Okay.
Okay, so I grew up dividing my time between CTUIR and the Grand Ronde Valley, and hearing a lot of stories growing up about how abundant the Chumash once was throughout this valley. It was always close to my heart to want to see it come back, and then to eventually learn how to process it. And this became a big community effort through the language program and through cultural resources the last few years. So I was able to partake. We were all able to partake and learn. And so as we're restoring it here, we also want to have an annual bake here in Cove. So as the summer camps are coming to an end, we'll begin our annual camas bake, Chumash Tamicht. This camp is intended to be a multi-generational tribal event centered around community building, traditional crafts and skills such as learning the art of camas baking, weaving tule mats and wupis, sup lil making, bone tools, and really the list goes on. We can have as much sharing and workshops and things as we can bring together. And with COVID, it's been hard to do much this last year, but we've been trying to do things as a small group. So these are pictures from last year's Tamaich, the rocks first getting heated up, and the ilpus, the firewood that I was told traditionally used would be alder. And one of the things here in Cove is there's wild plum and cherry thickets that have gone, from the settlers planted orchards, they've gone wild and they're just thick. And so every year I try to thin a little bit of them out and prune them up. And so we just use that plum wood for the Tamaich. Here's the rocks just about hot, and eventually getting the layers in, and this is when we're pulling it out, and that's the finished product. So along with restoring the camas to the site, we're also made an agreement to have the entire campus reserved for 1 week every year, and from now until forever, to have this bake. So we'd like to, make this a community event where we can reconnect with this valley. We go and gather all the materials from the valley, like the switch, the ryegrass we got from Lad Marsh. Yeah, the switch here, and then the rocks, the pushwa. We found some andesite nearby, where we can go get rocks. The shukwa, the mint. This is just right up the road from Cove, near Moss Springs Guard Station. This mint really likes to move into grazed areas, and so right near their horse holding facility, it just filled right in. So it's a nice place to gather it. Here's some sup lil that was made during camp. Everyone had their own little station and got to make their own and sun dry it. And then here's a picture of all the ladies canning it up after we're done, and Meadow documenting everything. And then that brings us to one of our, we'd like to work on learning and retaining and revitalizing as much skills as we can. And so we've been putting a lot of effort into hide tanning, turning particularly deer hides. We've been focusing on turning deer hides into smoked brain tan buckskin using the wet scrape method. And so during the winter time, particularly want to use that time to learn language. It's been really great having Zoom this year, learning language with Fred and Damien and everybody. And then also to be working a lot on these crafts. So we've been started last year. Well, we've been doing it ourselves as a family. Then last year we opened it up and had a small camp in our front yard where we had a couple tribal members come out and tan hides for a few days. And then we were able to, I applied for a grant and was able to receive it this year. And so we're able to purchase a bunch of tools and supplies and have a food provided. And again, with limitations with COVID, we're not able to do a whole lot, but we're still going to work together as a small group and take some pretty serious guidelines to just make sure we can, scrape some hides and tan some hides.
Yeah, all lodging is provided and everyone has their own areas to make it COVID safe. Same with meals. And we don't charge for this camp. We don't charge for any of the camps at all, but we just want to teach people how to do it if you want to learn. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's really the intention. I got a lot of people asking about what, whatever the case may be of buying hides and none of this we really want to do to try to make any money or anything. We just want to revitalize and perpetuate this knowledge and learn as much as we can and bring together students and teachers. We're young. We don't know. There's a lot we don't know, but we have the motivation, the determination, and starting to build the resources to expand our efforts out into the Grand Ronde Valley and surrounding mountains. and we didn't list it, but some of these crafts, Brosnan's been really devoted to learning cedar root weaving and a lot of different crafts. And so we hope to just keep expanding on that and eventually have a sort of a language and craft winter camp, and just put a lot of effort into that. So with all that being said, some of the changes, challenges, and channelizations that we're dealing with, and I decided to just put in channelizations because with every food, everything we're dealing with, it always comes back to water. And from the tops of the mountains all the way to the ocean, our water is treated like it's just a dead thing to be used however, and that I think is one of our biggest troubles there. So here in the Grand Ronde Valley is an extreme case of channelization and draining throughout the Grand Ronde Valley river drainage, and then the subsequent loss of suitable habitat for many first foods, and loss of cold, clean water sources in the mountains due to overgrazing and human impact. There's a lot of springs that are gone. There's a lot of water sources that are, you can't even filter through it. We even have pretty high-tech water filters that can't even handle some of our water sources. And then what's that? Also the meadows surrounding those water sources drying up sooner, and what's that going to cause? And then, large amounts of sheep grazing on some of our gathering areas. This is about maybe 1/10 of this flock of sheep that came to this pond while we were gathering some hamash nearby, and they just kept coming and coming, and none of the camas hardly had any seed heads on top anymore, so it's really lessening the reproduction opportunities, and also reducing the amount of forage for our wildlife. So how do we manage some of those interactions and bring some balance? And we're hoping that we can see more efforts to protect some of these water sources, and that maybe we can collaborate to include that into some of our summer camps and spring camps. We're seeing a lot of disease patches of berries. This is a picture of serviceberry at the Mount Emily Recreation Area. Nearly every serviceberry bush was covered in this this growth, or this, I think it might be a egg sac of some sort, but they were just covering the whole thing, and a lot of them were just eaten down to nothing. The huckleberries, a lot of them are spotted, and just as Cheryl was saying, some of the lower reach populations aren't doing very good at all. If they produce any berries at all, they're not doing very good, and so we're having to wait a little bit longer and move a little bit higher. And just the mistreatment of water is a huge thing. Lack of fire, a lot of overgrown and dying forest. That's why we're just hoping to make our camps kind of a grassroots effort to help with some of those things. The camps we're at, usually we leave them more fire resilient and better than we found them, and try to make that life way of land management how we live and move through the world. So the extreme weather fluctuations, just as Cheryl was saying, causing sporadic growth and dormancy patterns, often creating a shorter gathering season where things come on a lot quicker and go back underground a lot sooner. Sometimes they don't make any seed, or
The leaves are burned.
the leaves kind of seem burnt because there'll be a real warm event happen real early, and then another cold snap, kind of like spring and then winter, and spring and then winter again, and kind of joke around, say, oh, we're in our second winter or third winter, so that that's going to be something to that we're going to have to deal with. And that being said, here's another picture of the sun setting over one of our camas camps near us. This is near Spring Mountain. Yeah, thank you all for giving us the opportunity to share what we're doing, and thank you all for everything you do. It's a community effort. Take a lot of people taking a lot of little steps and big steps together to move forward. So we really appreciate you all, and yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. We are so honored by